I love Pokemon, and frankly, it's almost impossible for me not to. I've been playing the game since I was 10 years old. Before that point, I watched my friends play Gen 3 on their GBAs, and then when I finally got a DS, I started with Generation 4. I've played a version of every main series game soon after their release, and have gone on to play nearly every version of every game in every generation. For a long time, it was one of the only series I would play, and it is by far the series that I have played the most. I have various Pokemon plushies and knickknacks, and one of my most treasured possessions is a Ken Sugimori print I have on my wall. Hell, my channel logo is based on Team Skull's. Pokemon is a series very near and dear to my heart, and it will probably continue to be for years to come. But man, is it hard for me to love it in recent years. I do not like Sword and Shield. To me, they are average games at best, and disappointing games at worst. I think the story is a mess, with the characters being largely uninteresting or just bad caricatures of others that have appeared in the series. The Galar region is way too linear, the locations aren't very memorable, and the revolutionary wild area just falls flat in execution, as it's just a giant field that makes the region feel even smaller. They continue to make the game even easier than previous titles in an attempt to make the series more accessible to other audiences, even though accessibility has never been an issue with Pokemon. And then there's the technical issues, from the draw distance to the infamous trees and other textures. This game just wasn't well optimized for the Switch. The post-game was pretty bad as well, with a frankly dumb Dynamaxx mission involving the box legendaries, the most bare-bones and easily broken battle facility we've ever gotten, and a repetitive Dynamaxx and Gmax raids to waste our time. People were up in arms about the National Dex cut, but I quickly stopped caring about that when all of these other problems started coming to light. Now, that's not to say that Sword and Shield are irredeemable. I think the new Pokemon designs are some of the most consistently solid ones we've ever gotten, and the music is pretty great as well. I like the idea of making the gyms part of an actual sports league, and having an actual championship tournament instead of an Elite Four is something that fans have wanted for ages. But those few positives are woefully outweighed by the negatives for me, even when looking at how much other Nintendo series have been evolving and redefining themselves on the Switch. This was the first main series Pokemon game on a home console, and it was just extremely disappointing to me. And then they announced $30 DLC for a game that was already largely lacking in content. Fantastic. The first half of the expansion released with the Isle of Armor back in March. I finished it in about 2.5 hours, with one of those hours simply biking around the island to see how they improved over the wild area. And it was an improvement. There were now more biomes other than just field and desert, and I did enjoy going out on the ocean some, but other than the returning Pokemon, which I did not care to catch for maybe the third time, I just didn't find much of a reason to keep exploring the island. Now, the short story involving Kubfu was, of course, the highlight of this part of the expansion, but it went by so quickly that it just felt like a glorified legendary event. Out of the $30 expansion pass, Isle of Armor felt like it was worth maybe $5. So after this, I definitely did not have high hopes for the Crown Tundra. Well, now it's here, and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Don't get me wrong, I think it still has some major flaws and issues in certain parts, but there's still a bit of good here. So let's talk about it. The initial setup of the Crown Tundra is pretty basic. You meet the former Steel-type gym leader Peony, who's trying to take his daughter Peonia on an advent tour of the Crown Tundra, where they can investigate various legends associated with the area. She convinces us to go in her stead so she can check out the Dynamaxx Adventure Caverns, which is where all of the returning legendaries are found. I'll get to those later on, but for now, let's go over the different legends that Peony tasks us with investigating. So let's start with Calrex, since they are essentially the mascot for this part of the expansion. I actually quite liked his little story. The idea of him being a forgotten deity that you have to help get his powers back is a really neat idea, even though I do think the whole, oh, that's just a legend, that Pokemon can't be real, is so dumb and overplayed. Legendary Pokemon are an entire classification that have been proven to exist time and time again. If there's a legend about it, it's probably real. But that's besides the point. Helping out a little deer god who's communicating with you through the possession of Peony, who is pretty much just an inactive bystander the entire time, is honestly pretty comical. The series has touched on the idea of being able to communicate with Pokemon before with characters like N or the Footprint Man and Sinnoh, but I think this is the first time we've ever had a Pokemon speak to us directly, even if it's not through their own mouth. And then there's his trusty steed, either the Ice-type Glastrier or the Ghost-type Spectrier, depending on your choice of carrot. It's a cool idea, the king of the harvest literally reigning in the destroyer of crops. Now, while I think Game Freak is riding the Pokemon fusion train a bit too much these days, I won't lie, watching Calrex take control of Spectrier was pretty badass. He's finally regained his power and found a friend in you. It's not amazing or anything, but it's cute, and I felt more for him than I felt for just about any of the other characters in the base game. Next, there's the legendary birds, now with a new Gallerian style. Each bird still resembles their original designs, but now they have new characteristics that highlight their new typings. Zapdos has big legs to kick with, Articuno has psychic lasers, and Moltres is black instead of orange. Now their section is pretty short. You go to the special tree which makes them appear, and then they run off to their respective open world areas. Zapdos goes to the wild area, Moltres to the Isle of Armor, and Articuno to the Crown Tundra. Then you have to go chase them down and catch them. It's an evolution of the old roaming legendary concept, only now you can actually see where they are in the overworld, and they don't run away from the battles. And while it was brief, it was pretty fun to track them down. Chasing Zapdos across the wild area like you're reenacting a Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner cartoon is probably the most fun thing I've done in Sword and Shield. Articuno making psychic clones and guessing which one is real is a nice touch as well, and of course, Moltres gets the most creative encounter, as it just flies laps around the island. Overall, I think this part of the adventure is pretty solid. With regional variants having already been a thing for normal Pokemon, it makes sense that we'd eventually see some for legendaries as well, and hopefully we'll see more of this in the future. My only major complaint here is that we didn't get a Galarian Lugia, but that may just be my love of Mr. Wing Hands bleeding through. And finally, there's the Regis. They're a bit more streamlined compared to previous appearances, where instead of having to decipher Braille, you just need to solve the riddles for each of their respective ruins in order to access them. Regirock, Regice, and Registeel are the same as they always were, but now we have two new Regis to catch, Regieleki and Regidrago. Now, you can only get one, so be sure you know which one you want before starting the encounter, or else you'll be locked into it. Of course, where there are Regis, there is their master, Regigigas. But you can only encounter him if you have all 5 of the Regis in your party. So, if you don't have any friends to trade with, you're out of luck, buddy. That's pretty disappointing, but at least they're expanding the Regi roster a bit with these new entries. In addition to Peony's legendary quests, Sonia also tasks you with finding data on the Swords of Justice, Cobalion, Terrakion, and Virizion. Now, I wasn't even going to do this one, but then I learned that once you catch all 3 of them, you can get Keldeo, which would make this the second time a mythical Pokemon has been made available in a game outside of an event. So yeah, I found all the data and I caught them all just for the Keldeo. It's not worth it otherwise. Once the legendary quests are done, there are 2 other activities that you can do as part of the Crown Tundra. The previously mentioned Dynamaxx Adventures and the Gallerian Star Tournament. I do not like either of these. The Gallerian Star Tournament is just the normal championship tournament, but now you're partnered up with characters from the story in multi-battles. There's no set levels or restrictions like with a battle facility, so I just went in there with my level 100 team and swept the place. I was hoping that this would be something akin to the Pokemon World Tournament from Black and White 2, where we could see characters from across the series battle with and alongside us in a competitive format. Or maybe this would be a new battle facility to make up for the Battle Tower, since it doesn't have a multi-battle format or additional difficulties. Nope, just the same thing we already had, but now it's a multi-battle. Not even with friends, just NPCs. And the sad thing is, they even ended the tournament with a big send-off, like it's the end of a great adventure. But I just felt nothing, because I didn't care about 80% of the characters or anything that happened in the main story. It fell completely flat for me. Finally, there's the Dynamaxx Adventures, Game Freak's new spin on the old legendary roundup that they do every generation. It's designed in a similar way to the Battle Factory. You're in a group of 4 trainers, each of you picking from a random selection of rental Pokemon to use in a gauntlet of Dynamax and occasionally G-Max encounters. If you catch a Dynamax Pokemon, you can use it to replace the one you have in preparation for upcoming opponents. At the end of the dungeon, you'll find a Dynamax Legendary or Ultra Beast which you can attempt to catch. Upon completion of the adventure, you have a choice of which Pokemon you'd like to keep, whether it's a rare Pokemon you caught during the journey or the legendary boss. Now, I like the idea of Dynamaxx Adventures, but it has a lot of the same problems that normal Dynamax raids have. Many of the rental Pokemon are unevolved, and many of their movesets seem specifically designed to do as little damage as possible to artificially extend the battles. If you can't connect to people online, you're stuck with AI trainers which you have no control over. You can't pick their rental Pokemon for them, and you can't choose what moves they use in battle, so you are completely at the mercy of RNG. There is no reason for us not to have these choices when doing these adventures solo, and the fact that they made this mistake again, but now we can't even use our own Pokemon, just compounds the issue for me. You also only get 4 lives per adventure, not battle, per adventure. So if your teammates are dumb as usual and half of them get knocked out in the first battle, you may as well give up. Lucky for me, I don't care about returning legendaries. They bring them back every other game. They're not special anymore. I have duplicates of just about every legendary and Ultra Beast under the sun. I don't need more. I loved what they did with the new legendaries in this part of the expansion, but they really dropped the ball hard when it came to nearly everything else. The tundra itself looks fine, the snow is pretty, and some of the ruined areas are somewhat interesting, and of course the music is pretty great as per usual. But the camera issues and problems with the following Pokemon are still around from the Isle of Armor. But at this point, I don't see why I expected anything else. The Crown Tundra, while I did enjoy parts of it and it is an improvement over its previous expansion, doesn't make up for the disappointment that was the original Sword and Shield. If anything, many of those problems are carried over into this expansion, and frankly, it's not worth the $30 price tag. Overall, it may be worth half that, but I always say that much because Crown Tundra did make some improvements. But, if you ask me, I would have rather waited an extra year for Sword and Shield to actually come out as a complete package, instead of paying $60 for an unfinished game and then $30 for the lackluster expansion. Pokemon needs to be held to a higher standard if they're going to be charging us this much for future games, and if they're not, we'll be seeing a whole lot more of this in the future. Now, I love Pokemon, but my love only stretches so far with them, and if this keeps up, that love will be lost.